Let's go to the Philadelphia Eagles, the defending Super Bowl champions here for our last team that we're talking about. The best for last, quite literally, as they were the best in the NFL last season. Nick Sirianni in his fifth season as a head coach, their projected win total. Remember, I talked to you about it's hard to get, above 10 of a projected win total. The Eagles 11.1. We've got them with over 11 wins. Now, again, some people, this is great context because they look at this and be like, well, hold on. The Eagles won the Super Bowl. They won 14 games last year. What do you mean 11? Again, this is a great example of the projected win total, even for great teams, is typically going to be a little bit less than what they won the year before because it's almost impossible to project a team winning something like 13, 14, 15 games with the simulation. So 11.1, I'm just letting you guys know out there. That is an extremely high win total for a projection and a simulation that we have here for the Philadelphia Eagles. They are absolutely still to be feared this upcoming season. They were sixth in the NFL in overall offensive grade at an 82.2, and they were first in the NFL with a 91.2 team defensive grade last season. Now, we've had some changes from Philadelphia, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. Darius Slay is no longer there. C.J. Gardner-Johnson is no longer there. Milton Williams no longer there. Josh Sweat is no longer there. I'm sure there's another one that I'm thinking of that I'll look at the depth chart and I'll remember. But they had a lot of changes on their defense, right? Because when you are a good team, guess what? You got to pay all of these guys, and sometimes you just don't have the ability to do it. It's all about managing a winning window when you get to this point. So this was inevitable that the Eagles were going to have a little bit of subtraction on the roster, but they also had some additions in what I think was a really good draft class, once again, from Howie Roseman. How do you feel about the Philadelphia Eagles? Are they one of those teams that, yes, absolutely, you have to have them in the conversation to repeat? Or are you worried at all? And if you are, what is it?
You do. Even with a handful of losses, they returned, I think it was 20 of their 25 snap leaders from last year. And then you mentioned the great rookie class they have. They re-signed Zach Bond, so he didn't leave in free agency. You add Jahad Campbell next to him. I think it's the best linebacker room in football. They're always great in the trenches. Jalen Hurts, might have his critics, but he is consistent. You know what you're getting for the most part from Jalen Hurts year in and year out. You've got a great receiving core with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Saquon Barkley, the record-setting year last year. This team, to me, is still the most talented team in the NFC, and I think certainly talented enough to repeat as Super Bowl champions. They have all of the tools. They have great coaches. Vic Fangio and what he did on the defensive side last year was just unbelievable for a team that struggled big time the year before. Their coverage unit especially was the reason that they didn't win a Super Bowl or get far in the playoffs in 2023. This team's got all the talent in the world. They're one of the best teams in football, inner circle contender for sure.
We've talked a ton about the Eagles just over the last couple of years, specifically last year on their Super Bowl run. And so I don't think we have to spend a ton of time praising the Eagles because we did that so much with them as Super Bowl champions. I think the real part of the conversation to have here with Philadelphia has to deal with Jalen Hurts. And I think that really is the big conversation with Philadelphia because whatever your confidence level in Jalen Hurts is as a total quarterback, and we'll talk about passing versus rushing here in a second, but whatever your thoughts are on him as a whole, if you are confident in Jalen Hurts, it's hard to not be confident about this team to repeat as Super Bowl champions. But if you are skeptical about Jalen Hurts and the efficiency numbers that he has and what the variance of him, the peaks and valleys, the best games versus the worst, how he is in certain contextualized situations, like if you have your worries there, then all of a sudden I think that opens the door. Does it take them out of the Super Bowl conversation? No, I think at the very least you're having them in that first tier of teams that can win the Super Bowl. But I think the confidence in Jalen Hurts goes a long way into just how you feel about this team. Now, you've got some numbers here from him. The key stat that you have is a 91.1 rushing grade, second among all quarterbacks there for Jalen Hurts. The PFF passing grade of 65.3 through the divisional round, ranked 30th among qualified passers, 29.9 passing grade under pressure, which was worst among all starting quarterbacks. But then, of course, you've got the elite rushing grades from him. The tush-push sort of speaks for itself with the efficiency there. And certainly down the stretch, the NFC Championship game in the Super Bowl felt like two of his best games of his entire season, which you love to see your players, especially your quarterbacks, play best when the lights are brightest. What do we think about Jalen Hurts this year? What we saw from him last year? Do you think there's still that volatility from him? Do you think he's going to be as effective as a rusher? Do you think he'll get better as a passer? Overall, your thoughts on him?
I do think no matter where you have him in the rankings, and there's been a lot of arguments about this offseason about is he fifth, is he eighth, is he ninth, whatever. I do think it's a pretty widely agreed upon thing that Jalen Hurts is a top 10 quarterback, right? And considering the team that he's playing on, and a team that also throws the ball, at least last year, less than any other in the league, because they have Saquon Barkley and they have Jalen Hurts and they have this offensive line. They were the one team that ran the ball more than they threw it last year. He just plays his role very well, right? Don't put the football in danger. See the one-on-one matchups with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and take advantage. Like you mentioned it, all of the quarterback sneaks. Every time they're within 2 yards of the chains, they're going to let him do the tush push, and he gets all the rushing touchdowns down on the one that I'm sure Saquon fantasy owners hate. But, I think with Jalen Hurts, there are times where it's inconsistent in the passing game. It's also schematically not the most complicated passing game either. It's more based on the talent and especially A.J. Brown's ability to win in single coverage. There's times where it doesn't look pretty, but it doesn't have to look pretty when you have a supporting cast like this and a run game like this. They ask him to make a handful of explosive plays a game. Generally, he gets it done, right? There are times under pressure where it's not great throwing the football. He's going to use his legs more often. I think there's times against higher blitzing rate teams that he's going to struggle because sometimes getting the ball out quickly under pressure isn't always his strong suit, but I do think considering the way he's shown up in big moments, I would argue the 2 Super Bowls he's played in, those are the 2 best games of his career, right? I'd have to look at the grades and see if they're the 2 highest graded games of his career because that wouldn't shock me at all, but he's shown up in the big moments. He doesn't shy away from the criticism. He's tough as nails, obviously, as a runner especially. I think he's a top 10 quarterback, and he's playing with the best supporting cast in football. That's all you need to win a Super Bowl, right? If you have a guy playing at the level that Jalen Hurts does. Yeah, would I put him in there with the top 4 guys, Lamar and Allen, Burrow and Mahomes? I wouldn't, but he's also not that far behind him, right? I think he's certainly exactly what this team wants as a leader.
Philadelphia is leaning on a lot of young guys this upcoming season. Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, those guys obviously were there last year, but hey, okay, you had really good years as a rookie. The cornerback position is just very high variance anyways. And so are they going to have as good of a year as they had last year? I think some people look at it and say, oh, they were good as rookies. That just means they're always going to be good. And that's not necessarily the case, especially when you're in your first, 2-3 years in the league and you're playing that position. It is a naturally high variance position. So you have those guys that you're leaning on. Keely Ringo could very well be a starting cornerback for them this season. Andrew Makuba might end up getting some playing time as a starter over Sidney Brown. Maybe he starts the majority of games next to Reed Blankenship at safety, and that would be a rookie there. Jahad Campbell getting in the mix at linebacker. Obviously a rookie there. Jalix Hunt as starter for the first time, potentially as the edge rusher, replacing Josh Sweat. Smile Munden's probably going to get in the linebacker rotation as well. You've got some younger guys on the defensive line, but they've been there a little bit. Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis. You feel good about those guys there, but they're relying on some young guys on that defensive side of the football. Your thoughts overall about those guys some of them are second-year players, some of them are rookies, and you mentioned how much we liked this draft class for them. And so certainly from a scouting report standpoint and what we saw from them in college, I think it's a lot of talent that's there, but it doesn't always show up right away in the NFL, especially on that defensive side of the football that demands so much chemistry. So what are your thoughts? Do you have any reservations about how young it feels like this defense is for Philadelphia?
Not really, because aside from the rookies, you're talking about a bunch of guys, say Nolan Smith, DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, a bunch of guys who they went through a title run last year and they won a Super Bowl, right? So they're already kind of, it might be, okay, they're second-year guys, but they're already veterans at this point. They went through the entire grind of last season and playing, what did they play, 21? I mean, these guys played 21 games last year, won a trophy. They know what winning already looks like in that organization, and Howie Roseman's obviously done a great job of building it over time and sustaining it. So I'm not really worried about the guys from last year. There's a couple of spots. I'm curious to see whether it's going to be Sidney Brown or Andrew Makuba winning that other safety spot alongside Reed Blankenship. The second outside cornerback spot is interesting to me. Is it Kelly Ringo? Is it the veteran addition of Dory Jackson? And for as much as I think he's arguably the best slot corner in football already, do you maybe at some point, if you're struggling on the outside, do you move Cooper DeJean out there to the outside and maybe have Makuba with experience in the slot or somebody else playing in the slot? I think replacing Darius Slay on the outside is going to be an interesting storyline. And then, you're mentioning, you lose Milton Williams, who was the highest graded pass rusher at defensive tackle last year in the league. Josh Sweat's a good veteran pass rusher. You got a young pass rush in there too, especially off the edge. So I think off the edge with Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt and those guys, I'm curious to see what that looks like. And then that second outside cornerback spot, I'm curious to see what the solution is after losing Darius Slay.
Ben Lindsay's season-long bet for the Philadelphia Eagles that he likes is Jalen Hurts more than 3,500 passing yards this season. That's plus 150 on DraftKings. His explanation, quote, Hurts only had 214 dropbacks when trailing during the 2024 season. That was 29th in the NFL, as Philadelphia was often leaning on the run game even while playing from ahead. It's reasonable to expect some level of decline from an elite defense that lost four veterans in free agency, which would lead to higher passing volumes for Hurts. There are 21 quarterbacks with odds of at least minus 100 to hit 3,500 yards. I'll take the plus 150 for Hurts, who cleared it comfortably in 2022 and 2023, end quote. Thoughts on Hurts with over 3,500 passing yards?
I think what you have there is, I mean, we're going to see if the Eagles can still run the ball more than they threw it last season, right? And the change now from Kellen Moore, last year's offensive coordinator, now head coach of the Saints, to Kevin Patullo, the quarterback's coach, who's now taking over as the offensive coordinator. But I think last year, as you got further into the season, you just had to lean into, hey, we've got this elite running game. We've got Saquon Barkley out here setting records, and especially in the fourth quarter, he led the league, I think, pretty easily in fourth quarter carries last season, right? So you're talking about, okay, you're right with Ben there, is that if they're not ahead quite as often every single week, then Jalen Hurts is going to have to throw the ball in the second half, because he really had to do it last year. And 3,500, it feels like, again, as long as he plays 17 games, and last year he didn't play the last, he didn't play the last two games. Washington, he got hurt, and he didn't play the last two games. So he racked up 2,900 essentially in 14 games. I think if he plays all 17, and like Ben is saying, that they're trailing more often, 3,500 is not that high a number to hit, especially with the weapons you have on the outside. They even just added another one in John Mechie.
Yeah, it feels like 3,500 is almost like the benchmark number, I think, for a lot of quarterbacks when it comes to those over-under passing totals that you'll see. And in reality, like, there's a lot of quarterbacks that throw for 3,500 yards. You're basically saying if this guy is going to be fully healthy for 17 games and he's going to start, it's hard to not think that they're not going to eclipse or get close to 3,500 yards. So to get that at plus 150 for a quarterback that has absolutely no competition around him, and when he is healthy, he is going to be out there and playing with a really good offensive line, with really good wide receivers to throw the ball to, and a good running back to throw the ball to, too. I think that leans into that being a pretty logical bet there.
Quick stat I have on that real quick. 18 quarterbacks threw for 3,500 yards. I'm looking at this. Every single quarterback that played at least 16 games last year had at least 3,500 yards.
Yeah. There you go.